Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight for our program, Climate Action, Simple Steps to Leave a Better World for Your Children. This is hosted by two organizations, the Bloomington Sustainability Commission, which I'll introduce and you'll hear from shortly, and also the League of Women Voters Bloomington, which I'm a member. The League of Women Voters Bloomington is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages informed and active participation in government and influences public policy and education through education and advocacy. The Bloomington League has a long history in this community and is a resource for questions about issues, candidates, voting procedures, and resident involvement. We meet regularly throughout the year and coordinate candidate forums, community service projects, informational events like this evening's, and other activities. I am Lois Norgard, and I'm going to be your MC for the evening and introduce our other speakers. With that, I'm going to kick in and introduce our first speaker, which is somebody who needs no introduction, but Gene Winstead. He's a longtime mayor of Bloomington, and he is also a small business owner. So he is the owner of Ike's Restaurant. There's one in Minneapolis, one in the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, International Airport, and also one in Bloomington along 494. So I will introduce Gene, and he'll have his remarks for us here this evening.
Well, thank you for the shameless plug. That's that's greatly appreciated. It's all there. Well, it's fun here to be here this evening, really to greet you and say thank you for coming out, and thank you to the League of Women Voters who keep the topics that are so important to all of us in our communities. They keep them on the forefront, and they're out here and by sponsoring something like this tonight. But also on this subject matter, the city of Bloomington really has engaged with its Sustainability Commission. And I'll tell you, these are people in our community that have a passion for what's going on here. And it's on this Earth Day event, they really do express it well, but they keep it in our forefront, and really we really lean upon them as your city leaders to really implement programs and just an understanding of what's going on and keeping us moving as a city with sustainability, environmental sustainability, and just so many things in so many ways. So I have to just really say thank you to the Sustainability Commission. We have adopted sustainability as a strategic priority for the city of Bloomington. And what that means is everything we decide on the city, every policy we put forth, every ordinance we put out there, we layer on a sustainability component. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the thing that should be done for the community? Is it something that is good, really, for Bloomington and the region and the state and the earth? So we have to always be thinking down those lines. And we send all these things through our Sustainability Commission that they can comment and they can give us expert advice on what we should and shouldn't be doing. The city has accomplished so many things with really the support and the direction of the Sustainability Commission. We have entered into what's called the Green Steps program over time. And really what that does, it's some of the best practices that can be put out there for sustainability programs and practices. And what it is it's even how we design streets. It's the efficiency of our city vehicles, what we should be doing, what we should be buying as city vehicles to accomplish goals. Our operations of our own buildings, the HVAC systems, the lighting, things like that, full of LED lights in here. They're awfully bright too, but they are LEDs, and so they are very efficient. So we look at those things going for there. Arbor Day, our urban forest, it plays a part in all that goes on in the health of our city and really the region. Stormwater management, just different things like this. How we handle all these things are things that the city is addressing and working on. It was mentioned. The Sustainability Commission has been working with our local businesses for them to put in some best practices on what they can do. And you mentioned a shameless plug about the business that I have here in Bloomington. Well, it's a restaurant. And you'd be surprised how many small things we can do in that restaurant business that can address the issues that we're going to be discussing tonight. We do things like, well, first of all, when we went to build and put the restaurant in Bloomington, we went into a LEED certified building, very energy efficient building. We have got LED light bulbs throughout the restaurant, every place we can put them. We do organics recycling. We do compostable to-go containers and things like that. Just all the little things that can come together, and we can help inform and address these issues with all the businesses in Bloomington. It's going to take time, it takes effort, and it takes resources, but it is the ultimate goal. So, these are the different things that we're doing. Our Sustainability Commission put out a Plan 2 that was approved by the City Council, and it's to reduce carbon emissions within the city of Bloomington by 75% by the year 2035. It's an aggressive goal they've put out there, but if we keep working at it, we can get there, we can do it. And it really aligns with some of the other goals that are being put out by other entities and agencies, but Bloomington is going to be out there working in the same direction. And so, we're going at it that. So the other thing, too, is the city of Bloomington has added some staff people. We've put on a coordinator this past year for the Sustainability Commission for them to do their work, because it does take a lot of work to get these things done. So these are the things that your city is doing, and I'm happy to stand here and say that we're working in that direction. But it's with that, here again, a shout out to our Sustainability Commission, who's putting in a ton of energy into seeing to it that the city is moving in the right direction. They are our energies. They're behind us, and they're putting forth everything that we can do. And two, I need to put out the shameless plug for Xcel Energy. I was told to do that, and one of the things that they're working on, too, is the wind source program. And you've gotten our city council, everyone, to sign up for that and become a part of that over time here. So we're working in that direction. But you need to know that the utilities, that the different entities, the businesses are all working to make this a better community. And so we're here. Going to be some fun things to talk about and do tonight. So let's get going with it. And thank you for coming, and it's great to see everyone here.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the agenda that we have going on this evening, and then I'll introduce our questions. We're going to do a little test question so you can test out your buttons, and then I'll introduce the Sustainability Commission chair so that you can hear about what's going on through the commission. But yeah, basically, we're going to do the welcoming remarks. We're going to introduce the commission, and you'll get a little chance to meet some of the commission members. Overall energy and carbon conversation we'll have. We're going to have a home energy efficiency conversation, some simple steps that you can take in your own homes. Renewable energy, and the wind source is one of those, but you'll hear more about some of that. The electric vehicles will be introduced, and I know hopefully some of you had a chance to get out and see some of them that were parked out in our lot at 6:15. And we'll have a conversation about the organics and solid waste that we have going on in the city. There's also a food and agriculture conversation that's going on. So we'll have the second largest source of carbon introduced through an organization. So with that, I think we are at the question time. So your first question here, test question, is how much do you know about the Environmental Quality Board, the EQB, here in Minnesota? So it's our Minnesota Environmental Quality Board. You have three choices, and what you do is you hit the buttons at the top of your little machine, the A, B, C, depending on your answer. And this will be real time, and we'll get a chance to test and see how many people have been influenced by this organization. Give it a few minutes for everyone to have a chance. Or a few seconds, I should say. I'm gonna get our answer up. Oh, I'll have a definition at the end of the night about who this is. So with that, I'm going to move on to our next question and introduce Tim. Prior to hearing about this event, what did you know about the Sustainability Commission? And you'll have a chance to answer this question as I invite Tim up to speak, but Tim has been a Bloomington resident for almost 30 years. He's retired, so has time to focus on things he is passionate about. After a nearly 40-year career in information technology as consultant, manager, and executive, he is now devoting his time to organizing like-minded people to work toward a sustainable future. In 2015, Tim formed a task force to look at the possibility of getting establishing a sustainability commission modeled after similar commissions in cities around us, Eden Prairie, St. Louis Park, and Edina. The task force presented their findings to the City Council and recommended that they make environment sustainability one of their top priorities. The City of Bloomington priority for Bloomington, and to form a commission to lead on implementing their strategies. The council agreed, and in October of 2016, the Bloomington City Council unanimously established the Bloomington Sustainability Commission. In January of 2017, the council appointed 9 members to the first commission, and in March of that year, Tim Sandry was elected as the first chair of the commission and continues in that role today. So welcome, Tim. Come on up, and hopefully we are almost done with the question.
Well, it looks like we have a little work to do here. And tonight will probably help. So, as Lois said, my name is Tim Sandry, and I'm the chair of the relatively new Sustainability Commission. And I want to thank and welcome you here tonight. The room is pretty full, which is really a good sign. So especially on a kind of a cool, kind of rainy night, I'm sure that the electric vehicle thing was a little wet, but hopefully you got a chance to take a look at it. Tonight I'm going to just do a brief overview of the commission and discuss some of the high-level indicators of the status of sustainability within Bloomington. You know, it really boils down to, why do we care? You know, what is it? You know, what's going on that we should be concerned about this? I'm going to go over some of that briefly, and then spend some time just talking a little bit about what the commission is up to. What's our main focus at this point in time? And I'm going to leave it to other speakers to talk about specifically what you can do. And if you want to, you know, talk about any of this more, please stop by our table after the event. So, as Lois and the mayor indicated, there was some strategic planning that City Council did a few years ago, and they decided that environmental sustainability should be one of the strategic priorities for the city going forward. And out of that was born the Sustainability Commission. This is the current makeup. There's 10 members. And the ordinance that established us requires that at least the majority of us have deep expertise in some area of sustainability. So it's not only people who are passionate about this, but it's also people who know a lot about it. We also have a young person seat that was added recently, which reminds me that that seat is going to open up in September, and so there'll be applications that will be going out shortly. So as you know of someone, you know, young person who might be interested in being on the commission, you know, once you see the notice, tell them to go out and do an application. So this is some language from our charter about what it is that we're up to, and you know, I can summarize this kind of in a nutshell, which is what we're about is influencing the behavior of everyone who lives and works in the city of Bloomington to live a more sustainable life, you know, for the benefit of this current generation, but especially the future generations. And knowing that we have a population of 85,000 people here in Bloomington, and we probably have as many people that work here, trying to influence the behavior of 170,000 people, that's a pretty tall order. But, you know, we're going to take it one day at a time. So, behavior change, you know, kind of bottom line. this is a long list. I'm not going to read through all these, but this is a long laundry list of things that we are asking people to change their behavior around. And it's broken up into 4 different areas, which is in our charter, these are the areas that we focus on. Carbon energy, solid waste, water, and ecological land stewardship. And our speakers tonight are going to address some of these, and for those that they don't and you're interested about, stop by our table. We'll be happy to talk about what you can do. So specifically, I'm going to talk about some of the current strategies in each of the 4 areas and current situation and strategies in each area. So the question is, from an energy and carbon standpoint, why do we care? Well, we care because the city of Bloomington generates over 1 million tons of carbon on an annual basis. And some of that comes from natural gas, some comes from electricity. And, you hear big numbers, and it's hard to get your head around what that looks like. So what does 1 million tons look like? Well, it looks like 10 of these aircraft carriers, 10 of them. That's how much carbon we generate. Or, 200,000 elephants, or 200,000 horses. I mean, that's the magnitude of the amount of carbon that we generate on an annual basis. To me, that's a call to action. And that's what the Bloomington sustainability is that's why we're focused on this. As the mayor mentioned, we have come up with a goal to reduce carbon emissions within the city of Bloomington by 75% by 2035. As he also mentioned, it's a big goal, and so we're going to be focused a lot on that. And the way we get that done, there's 2 kind of primary ways. One is Xcel Energy is actually going to do a lot of work for us by just greening up their grid. They're using more and more wind and solar to generate electricity. In fact, if we did nothing, we'd probably get to about 30% of that goal just because Xcel Energy is doing what they're doing. But we've got to pick up the rest of it. And what that is essentially is conservation, doing the home energy squad visits, doing the work that comes out of that, and it's looking at renewables, signing up for wind source, doing solar panels, sign up for a solar garden, those sorts of things. And to get more information about all those things, you can certainly stop by our table, by the CEE table, the Xcel Energy table. There's people here that can talk to you about those specific programs tonight. In the area of solid waste, we do a pretty good job. Here in Bloomington, we do a pretty good job with recycling. And you know that because if you drive down the street, a lot of cases you'll see a large recycling bin on garbage day, right? And a small garbage bin. So we do a pretty good job. The only thing that we really need to worry about from that perspective is making sure that we're putting stuff in the recycling that belongs in the recycling and not contaminating it. Our next target is going to be organics, and John Hymas is going to talk a bit about that tonight, and why that's important. But what many of you may know about this already, we have set up some organic drop-off sites in the city of Bloomington so that you can go and drop off your organics. Ultimately, we need to get to curbside. We're probably a few years out. In the meantime, we've set up a process that you can drop off your organics. We'll also be announcing sometime this year a textile recycling program. Textiles make up 10 to 15% of the waste stream, and so this will be a way to not have to throw away those textiles. Curbside recycling. So you may have seen pictures of this. This is Burnsville is planning to build a new dump, and this is an artist's rendition of what that's going to look like. Once it's done, it's going to be taller than the Highland Ski Hill and taller than Buck Hill. And this is artist's rendition of it. looking southward along Xerxes Avenue as you look down towards Burnsville. So what has this got to do with curbside cleanup? Well, so every year, the curbside cleanup program, we collect about 1,500 tons of stuff, and it goes to a landfill, and it's going to go to this mountain. So, and the weekly trash, that we throw out goes through a burner, but the curbside cleanup, it all goes into the landfill. And, the burner has its own issue, but from a landfill perspective, this is an ecological disaster because a lot of this is going to end up generating methane, which is 100 times more powerful green gas than carbon is. So this is really not a good thing. So what the commission is doing, we know curbside cleanup is really popular. We're not saying that we should get rid of curbside cleanup. What we are looking for is, can we find alternatives? A lot of the things that get put out there, like mattresses and couches and carpet and stuff like that, it can be recycled. And so we need to find alternative ways for people to be able to get that stuff into recycling as opposed to going into the mountain. Water. So think in your mind, how much water does Bloomington use on an annual basis? Maybe 100 million gallons, maybe 1 billion gallons, no idea. Well, so here's what the answer is. City of Bloomington uses 3.8 billion gallons of water on an annual basis. And again, how do you visualize 3.8 billion gallons? Well, for those of you that have ever been to Lake Harriet, that's about that amount. Lake Harriet is 3 miles in diameter and about 85 feet deep. So that's how much water we use on an annual basis. And where does it come from? Well, 80% of it comes from an aquifer that's down below us, an aquifer that's water's being drawn out by cities around the metro. And we take out 8% of whatever 80% of 3.8 billion gallons is. And this is an aquifer, we are drawing it out faster than it's recharging. So long term, this is not a sustainable solution. So the other question is, so what do we do? What do we do with 3.8 billion gallons of water? Well, half of it goes on our lawns. 1.75, whatever half of that is, it goes on our lawn. And the problem is that half of that is wasted because people water too much, they water at the wrong time of the day, it evaporates or it runs off into the street. You've seen the sprinklers going off in the heavy rain, and not only is it watering the lawn, but it's watering the street and those sorts of things. So the city council is aware of this issue, is looking at a water goal of reducing water consumption by approximately 10% over the next 10 years, mostly in the commercial sector. And so the commission is working with residents through education, working with businesses through outreach to help everyone figure out how they can start using less water for the lawns, either through technology, education, or converting your lawn to something that doesn't require a lot of water. Alternate turfs, prairie plantings, rain gardens, those sorts of things. So we don't have a speaker on water tonight, so feel free to stop by our table and we can tell you more about that. Surface water. We all know what happened at Lake Normandale, right? They had to drain it. They had to put down iron stuff to neutralize all the phosphate, that sort of thing. Well, that's because everything that we put on our lawn ends up going into the streams and into our lakes and rivers. Including fertilizer, dog poop, all that stuff. So the commission. It's true. It's like, I looked it up. 15% of the phosphorus that goes into our lakes and rivers, dog poop. So, and as I said, you know, the commission is going to continue to push residents to figure out how to use less fertilizer, keep leaves out of the street, you know, all those sorts of things to keep the water clean. The other issue is that the 9 Mile Watershed Creek is listed as impaired for chloride. And chloride is really bad. You know what chloride is? Salt. And it's really bad. It's hard to get, you know, once it's in the water, you can't get it out. You know, I mean, we have oceans that have salt in them. That salt isn't coming out of those oceans. It gets into a lake, it's not coming out. It kills the aquatic plant life and animals in the water. So, where does all this chloride come from? Road salt, right? The stuff that, you know, now the city of Bloomington is a leader in terms of how little salt they actually use. Now, unfortunately, in the commercial, if your church has a parking lot or you go to a store that's got a parking lot, the commercial salt applicators aren't quite on the same page yet. So the commission is going to be working to try to get businesses to look for, to hire low applicators that are trained in low chloride application. And as residents, we've got to do the same thing. You get a little ice on your driveway, and you want to go through. We got to figure out how to do that. You know, just use the minimum that's needed. And so, there's education that's out there on the website already, and we'll continue to promote that. And last but not least, ecological land stewardship. So, how much of Bloomington, the land in Bloomington, how much of that do you think is open and natural? You know, it's parks, open natural spaces. So maybe 10%, 20%, 40%. Well, let's see here. About 35% of Bloomington is natural open. Really. So if you think about the Minnesota River Valley, you think about Highland Park, you think about the Anderson Lakes, Tierney Woods, you know, when you start thinking about it, we have a lot of this natural open space, and it's really a jewel for Bloomington. I mean, we probably have more open space than any other city in the metro, right? And it's a secret. And I think it's even a secret from the residents of Bloomington. So one of the things that the commission is looking at is cataloging, a process of cataloging kind of the ecological health of all these natural open spaces, both those owned, you know, focused primarily on those owned by the city of Bloomington, but also those that aren't, you know, that are owned by Three Rivers or the Department of Natural Resources or whatever, as a forerunner to come up with a plan of how do we maintain and enhance and restore these areas for future generations, because a lot of them are becoming overrun with native species, invasive species, and that sort of thing. So that's really the end of what I have to say about all that. 170,000 people that we need to change their behavior, right? And, you know, behavior change doesn't come from putting a notice in the briefing or, you know, whatever. It really comes from having face-to-face conversations like this. So as you have a church group or some other service group that you think might be interested in hearing about this, let us know. We'd be happy to come out and talk, give people specific ideas about what they can do in their life to be more sustainable. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight.
So I believe we have a question set up. Yeah. Yes. The next question is this one, and I think, was there time that we were collecting questions on cards for Tim? No. Okay. All right. So this is your next question to test with your beeper, and then I will introduce our next speaker, Joe Stroman. Joe serves on the Sustainability Commission for the City of Bloomington. He's focusing mainly on energy issues. He grew up in Bloomington and lives here now with his wife and children. He recently started a business, 2040 Energy, to develop clean energy heating solutions for cold climates like Minnesota. His background is in the software industry, where he worked for 14 years, and he holds an MS in computer science from the University of Minnesota. So this is a question that Joe will answer for us.
Thanks, Lois. So I don't know if that takes us right to the, okay. So we go right to the results. You know, it's a pretty like self-selecting audience here, right? We all came out to a climate-related event. We'll come back to this. We'll come back to what we thought about this in a moment. Here's what the country thinks. This was a study just in January. Yale did a survey nationwide. How concerned are Americans about global warming? And the category that dominated this room, very concerned, is the smallest out of all the three options that they had nationwide. You know, a big percentage of the country isn't concerned about this at all. They think it's not a problem or that somebody else is taking care of it. So, you know, what does this mean for us? If we're in that green section of the pie, or maybe in the greenish part of the yellow part of the pie, it means that we have to do more than our fair share, because a lot of people aren't going to do anything at all, and a lot of people are only going to do a very little. So the federal government is doing a very little, and the state government is, you know, they're also doing a very little. So the responsibility to move things forward, it falls on us. We need to be the climate leaders, people like us that would come to a climate event on a rainy Tuesday evening. So what this means is we need to make an outsized impact on the problem. We can't just do the things that are easy, convenient, and cheap. We should do those, and the speakers after me today are going to have a lot of great, easy, convenient, cheap ideas for you all to do. But if 29% of us pull our weight, that's not going to be enough. So how do we do this? You know, I'll start with the easy stuff, right? It gives you a base to build on. And what you'll find is that the more, you know, once you've sort of shored up what you see as your personal contribution to climate change, whether it's the energy you use in your home, the energy you use to drive, the food you eat, you know, the garbage you create, then it gets a lot easier to kind of take the next step and to try and do something that's going to influence broader society. The next, you know, tell your elected leaders how you feel. This picture here is our House vote in Minnesota from a few days ago, and it was simply about adding a clause to an energy bill that humans are the primary contributor to climate change. And there's a lot of red there. A lot of people voted no. A lot of people said, no, that's not true. We don't want to put that in the law. And if I had had a chance to update the slides today, they did another vote in the Minnesota State Senate. There was more red than, or to take it out, to take the same, so the House, the Greens won here, right? They said, okay, we're adding this to the bill. The Senate said, let's take it out. And the Greens won there. So it's not going to be in the bill anymore. This, you know, it's just to illustrate that there are a lot of people that are not invested in this problem, don't care about this problem. The responsibility falls on us. And the elected leaders, so from the city level, the state level, the federal level, you know, they, for the most part, will govern the way that they think their constituents want, right? Like, it's sort of surprising to, you know, it's maybe not your first instinct, but they're trying to do right by their constituents. If they see the results of that survey and they see, well, a few people are a little concerned, most people are kind of ho-hum, and some people don't care at all. Well, it seems like the middle ground will be ho-hum about it. And that's what is happening for the most part, especially at the state level and the federal level. And so the way that we can change that is to reach out to our elected leaders, to tell them, no, this is a really important thing. We need you to take care of this. It's important to us as voters that you take care of this, that you work on this. I don't suggest that you go out and tweet at Donald Trump to, support massive climate action. That's not going to work. He's not going to listen. But at the city level, and even at, your state and federal congressional reps and senators, that can have a big impact. They're all trying to find the right place to be on this issue. We can guide them towards that green section of the pie. The other thing that you can do is you can talk to your friends and family. You do those things, those easy things, the home energy squad, the wind source so you get clean energy. Maybe your next car is an electric vehicle. Maybe you recycle a little more. Tell your friends and family, your neighbors, whoever, what it is you're doing and why. Don't be pushy about it. Don't badger them for not doing it themselves, because then just nobody will like you. They're not going to listen to what you have to say. But if you're just open about what you're doing and why you care, it's not very often that people tell us about an issue that they care about and why they care about it. So that can be real impactful. And, people need a little nudge to move them from one section of the pie to the other, right? If you're in this green section of the pie, or you care a lot about the issue, you're very worried about climate change, then, you can nudge people like that to the point where they're a little more activist about it, where they're taking time out of their day or their week, where they're, spending the money on doing an insulation upgrade, even though it's a 15-year payback instead of, a 5-year payback. Or you can move somebody from the yellow, help move somebody from the yellow section to a green, that, they know this is a problem, but they think it's being dealt with, or they don't see it as a very dire issue. You can tell them, this is something that's going to be impacting all of us. It's impacting us already. We see it in the weather. We see it in the flooding. We see it in the sea levels. And if somebody's a climate denier in the red area, I don't really know what to tell them. I can just, I can tell you what I say, which is, what if you're wrong? And, I usually leave it at that, because if they come back with, what if I'm wrong? Well, I've got a pretty good answer. And then we're doing a lot of stuff that has a lot of other benefits too. Clean energy, clean air, clean water, better jobs, energy security. So it ends up, it's a win-win situation, whatever actions we're taking. And I'll close on that. Right.
Thank you. Do we have questions? No. Okay. Do people know that they can be filling out question cards and handing them in? Just pass them on down, and at some point we'll get to your answers. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker. And here's your question as I introduce. Stacy Bootscamp. Stacy has been with the Center for Energy and Environment, CEE, since 2009. Stacy started in the field as an energy counselor on the Community Energy Services Program and Home Energy Squad Enhanced Program. In 2012, she stepped into a new role as recruitment and outreach coordinator for CEE's residential energy programs. She is now the assistant manager for those programs. Stacy has over a dozen years of community and environmental organizing experience. She has a BA in English and Environmental Studies from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Membership, certified energy auditor by the Dunwoody Institute, and permaculture design certification from the Regenerative Design Institute in Bolinas, California. So welcome, Stacy, and thank you for being here. And I guess this is the button to get your answer.
Yeah. Okay. What a crowd. This is great. Nice work, everyone. So how many of you have had an home energy squad visit? Wow, that's a lot of people. Awesome. Should I go to the answer now?
Yes.
Okay, you got to use your clicker first. No. Are we ready, Steve? Do you get the live results on your?
It just keeps track.
Okay. All right. So a lot of you have had a visit, like your show of hands told us, so that's great. And you've even done some of the work, so that's even better. So I'm happy to see that, but there is room for all of us to have a visit and to do the work that's recommended and make an impact on the climate. So the Home Energy Squad is a program that's provided by CenterPoint Energy and Xcel Energy. It's a very comprehensive, award-winning program, and you're lucky to have access to it here in Bloomington, and the city actually pays for half of the cost here in Bloomington, which makes it a super deal. So I work for a nonprofit organization. We've been around working on energy efficiency for 40 years in Minnesota, and we do a lot of research that informs programs we design and deliver. So we work not only with residents, homeowners, we work with businesses, nonprofits, utilities, just trying to help everyone save. So that kind of goes over both of those. We also work on public policy, and we have a lending center and an engineering department. We've got about 150, 160 employees. We're always hiring, so if you're looking for a job, you can come and talk to me after this too. So I'm going to talk about the Home Energy Squad program tonight, though, because that's what I work on. So this program is available to 1 to 4 unit buildings, and it's available to owners and renters. Xcel Energy also has a couple other programs which we interface with sometimes, the Multifamily Building Efficiency Program, and also we help connect people to the Home Energy Savings Program, which helps to get low-income households access to free energy efficiency appliances. So the Housing and Redevelopment Authority has been a partner here in Bloomington since 2013, and over 1,200 residents have participated in the program, but there are 85,000 people here. I think there's maybe around 25,000 single-family homes. So there's a lot of room for more people to participate. Bloomington's also working on Partners in Energy with Xcel Energy, as some of you might know, but that is work towards smart energy planning for the community, and it's great that you all are participating in that. So with the Home Energy Squad program, we work on community engagement, like events like this. You might see us at the farmers market. We also come out and do the Home Energy Squad visits. And then we have a team of people that follows up with you after your visit to help you take those next steps. And then you can enjoy a more comfortable and efficient home after doing those steps. So we like to make it easy for you to make your home comfortable and efficient, and help you to feel good about not wasting money and energy anymore. And then you can have that peace of mind, like people who've already participated, that you've brought your home to that basic level of efficiency. And then you can move on to looking at other things like renewable energy. So the average household in Minnesota spends almost $2,000 a year on utility bills. And so that is a motivation for folks to save, oftentimes, almost always. That's the first motivator for saving. But maybe in this audience, there are other motivations too, I hope. Where does our money go? About 55% of that, of course, goes to making our houses warm, comfortable, cool, and comfortable. And then the other 45% is divided between our electronic use, our appliances, and our water heating. So the Home Energy Squad tries to help people save in all of these sectors of energy use. Here's some of our friendly staff that you may have encountered at your home energy visit. So when we're at the house, we like to help people start saving right away, and we do that by installing products like door weather stripping, water heater blanket, programmable thermostat, LED light bulbs, water saving fixtures, and those are great. They help you save right away, and then you can feel good that you've taken that first next step. We also do a blower door test, which measures the air tightness of the home. We check the insulation, test the heating system and water heater, and we put everything together in a report for you with personalized next steps. We can write up a quote that's honored by participating insulation contractors, and like I said, we are a nonprofit, so we're a third party giving you this information, and that can give you some peace of mind too. Here's some of our energy advisors that help people with those next steps. And we also have loans to help people with financing, really low interest loans to help people take those next steps. And so does the city of Bloomington, has some really great financing. And then if you do all of the things that are recommended, you might even get a home energy certificate. And you can join a few hundred of those elite people who have their home certified as an energy fit home in Minnesota. So that's all I have for you. Thanks for inviting me to talk tonight, and I'll be out here if you would like to sign up for a home energy squad visit.
And Stacy, I need you to stay. I have 2 questions that have been turned in for you. So, are there incentives for converting from gas heat water heaters to heat pumps? Any incentives for that right now?
For water, gas heat water heaters, or just?
I'm probably from gas to geothermal or solar.
There are really good heat pump rebates. So there are rebates for air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and then high efficiency furnaces. So I don't know that there are any additional incentives for switching, but there are really great heat pump rebates that are available.
And my second question here that was turned in is, what % savings do you typically see from an insulation retrofit?
I think the last statistic I read was 14 to 17%. And so that's a pretty good reduction that you can feel good about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for the questions. I will move us into our next question and introduce our next speaker. So this is the one you use your buttons for. Our next speaker is Nicholas Martin from Xcel Energy. Nicholas serves as Manager of Energy and Environmental Policy for Xcel Energy, part of a team spearheading the company's strategy for affordable carbon reduction. He advises on federal and state clean energy policy, helps prepare integrated resource plans, works with large customers on sustainability strategy, and helps design new options for renewable energy, procurement and transportation electrification. Mr. Martin previously worked for the American Carbon Registry, developing offset protocols and registering projects for the voluntary carbon market and California cap and trade market, and managed a forestry enterprise for the Zuni India tribe. He has an MS in Energy and Resources from the University of California at Berkeley and a BA in Music from Yale. Welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Is right there.
Okay. People been voting yet on this? So you won. The majority of you chose the right answer. Those are, this is from the ground to the tip of the blade on the kind of newest, biggest land-based turbines. Out in the sea, they're even bigger. But these turbines have gotten quite large, quite sort of to the point where like the constraint is how do we like drive them around corners to like where they have to be installed and stuff like that. So anyway, that's a nice perspective. It's a little bit taller than the Fauché Tower in Minneapolis, not counting the needle if you want to get really technical. So I am going to talk mostly tonight about, I'm going to be pretty brief and talk mostly about sort of our carbon vision, but what, you know, the goals that we've set and some of the drivers of that. But I'm going to come around to telling you about, you know, some stuff that you can do that you ought to do tonight to do your own part on climate change. So I'm going to go from pretending to be a climate scientist to sort of a used car salesman thing at the end, and give you a chance to take some action before leaving here tonight. Okay? So I will. So this is just a picture of the area that Xcel serves. We're in 8 different states, but the one at the top, the 5-state region at the top is what many of you are used to thinking of as Northern States Power. So that's our upper Midwest territory, including here in Minnesota, a lot of, you know, the Twin Cities and surrounding area. One really important thing to note about that service territory is that it's some of the best wind resource in the country. So we're really fortunate. Part of the reason we have so much wind on our system is that we've got great wind resources all the way from the top to the bottom of the country, right? And pretty good solar resources as well. The numbers for Minnesota are about 1.3 million electricity customers and 460,000 natural gas customers. So that's the share of the overall numbers there. We have sort of 3 strategic priorities that you've got to talk about in every Xcel Energy presentation. These are really equally weighted. I'm going to talk to you tonight mostly about the first one, leading the clean energy transition, but it's equally important that we're sort of trying to deliver more options, more affordable clean energy options for our customers, and I'll talk about some of those at the end of the presentation, and to do all this while keeping bills low. We think electricity needs to stay quite affordable. Certainly, as we're talking about electrifying more of the economy, that needs to be one of the main considerations as well. So we try to balance all of these things. So about the carbon goal, some of you might have heard about this, others perhaps not. Actually, before I say about the goal, how have we done to date? Since 2005, which is a really common baseline year, it's also the baseline year for the state of Minnesota, we have managed to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions by 38%, which is, compared to the U.S. the electricity sector in the U.S. as a whole has reduced by about 28%, 30%, something like that. So we're a little bit ahead, but overall, the electric power sector is one of the bright spots in terms of having been able to reduce more than other sectors. That's all has to do with renewable energy and shift away from coal generation nationwide and for Xcel Energy. So it's a good progress. We've already exceeded what would have been the goal under the EPA's Clean Power Plan, what would have been the goal for 2030, and we exceeded that a couple of years ago. So that's really positive. But we haven't gone far enough. We're needing to, we're setting new carbon goals to try to push that further. And we recently announced, just in the last few months, we announced some really aggressive goals. The first one is 80% carbon reduction by 2050. The state goal is 80% by 2050. We set a goal of 80% by 2030 to try to get our system there 20 years earlier. And the really positive thing to say about that is we think we can do that affordably and with technology that's available today. I'll say a little bit more about that. And then we are one of the only utilities in the country that set a goal to be 100%, to provide 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050, which is more, even more of a stretch goal, but something we are committed to do as well. These goals are really driven by several things. Probably more than anything, increasing demand. There's tremendous demand from our communities and from our large customers for clean energy. And also, there's demand from investors, there's great investment opportunities, and there's, climate risks that we all have to think about seriously. We're feeling in our states, and we need to all be doing our part toward those. So all those factors really went into our goal. So let me say a little bit more about the components of this goal. We know we can get to 80% by 2030 in a variety of ways. We file resource plans at our Public Utility Commission that will determine exactly how we do that. But we know it's going to include these elements. We're adding a huge amount of wind in the next 5 years. We're going to keep adding more wind. We're going to be adding a lot of solar as well. We'll be adding some natural gas, but some of that natural gas over time may be replaced by energy storage. We think it's going to be key to maintain our nuclear plants, at least through their current licenses. That's about half of our carbon-free energy. You've heard about we'll be retiring coal units and changing the way we operate existing coal units. And we're increasingly really trying to promote more and more electrification, and EVs is a great example of that. We also talked about how getting to 100% carbon-free energy will require some major investments in technologies that don't exist today. Carbon-free, dispatchable technologies, and long-duration energy storage. So we're going to be working on all of that. I'm going to skip over a couple slides here just to get to the ways to take action tonight, because I think this is really important. Climate change can seem like such a big global problem. What can I do about it myself? And I really do believe that everyone can do something, and it really matters. So here's some of the things. I just want to highlight a few things here, and then I want to urge you. This is the used car salesman part. How can we get you into renewable energy or energy efficiency today before you leave the room, before you leave the building? So there's a lot of ways that we provide for you to do renewable energy for your own house or business quite affordably. Wind source is one of those. You can sign up for that tonight. takes almost no time, and it's really not very costly. The cost of wind energy, a lot of that is offset by a credit for avoided fuel purchase. So I do that myself. I think it's a great thing to do. I think it's kind of a no-brainer. There's a lot of other ways you can do that too, through solar rewards and other programs. So please check that out, and please just sign up before you leave tonight, if that's something you feel you can do. The second category there, energy efficiency is really important. You can save a lot of carbon by saving energy, and you've heard about the Home Energy Squad. That's a great way to do it. Saver Switch is another program where just by letting Xcel Energy cycle your air conditioner off in short intervals through the summer, I'm on it. We never know it happens. You don't feel it. But it can, that peak energy is often served by natural gas power plants. So that can save carbon to just allow us to shave some of those peaks. That's important too. And then the last area, choosing to drive an EV. Obviously, that's a bigger decision, right? But there's really a lot of things that we're doing to try to make that easier. I'd urge you to check out on our website. We've got an awesome online EV advisor that helps you think about which EV might be best for you. What could your gasoline, your fuel cost savings be based on how much you drive and so on, which EV you're considering, and what rates are available. We've got some EV rates that are available today and a lot more that's coming, as we've had some programs recently approved by the Commission. So that's really a really useful thing to do. And if you've thought about this but you're hesitating, just go test drive an EV. It's an exciting experience. It costs, generally speaking, less than $1 a gallon to drive, gallon equivalent. The ranges are getting up above 200 miles. So you really don't have to worry about some of these things so much anymore. I'll leave more about this to Yuka, who can tell you much more about EVs than I can. So those are just some things to think about. We've got a lot of info on these programs out here. I hope you really think about those. I hope you'll check out the EVs as you go. And I think it's really important. You know, we're working as a company to take the system to a cleaner system, but all of you can do something yourselves to address climate change risk as well. So I urge you to do that. Thank you.
I do have questions for you, so let me ask those, and if you want to stand at the podium to answer, but they're picking up. Questions are picking up. How much solar do you see going on site, rooftop, versus out in the country?
So that's a good question. I don't have off the top of my head like exact sort of proportions or something. But it's happening at every level. So when you put solar in large installations out in the country where you can put it all in one place, you get big economies of scale. You can do that very cost effectively. That's going to be a way to build solar with the economies of scale at a lower cost per megawatt hour or per megawatt, right? But that doesn't mean, like, there's all kinds of values of solar on homes as well, where it's sited on the distribution system, and you know, it has sort of a concrete benefit that you can feel as well. So we try to support all of those things. I think in scale, there's going to be more out in these farms than there is on the rooftops if you add it all up. But it's really important, I think, to in terms of leading by example and thinking about that too. So we're trying to facilitate folks putting it on their roof as well.
Thank you. When will Xcel be done with coal plants?
So that's a really a question that is going to be addressed in detail in an integrated resource plan that we will file July 1st. It's a question of tremendous interest. We have committed to retire two of the coal units at our Shakopee plant in Becker in the mid-2020s, which leaves just two remaining coal units, a third one at Shakopee and one at the King plant out near Stillwater, that whose retirement dates are up in the air and will be discussed in this integrated resource plan. And there's a lot. It's a complicated process. There's a lot of sort of things on either side in terms of how we time those retirements. So we'll be talking about that in our plan. But our CEO has said it's a matter of when, not if. And I think I will say that I think those dates are going to move up. Those plants are not going to run to the end to their full sort of depreciated book life. I think there's a lot of reasons to look at shifting and replacing them, while also, of course, taking care of those communities where there's a lot of jobs and there's a significant contribution to the tax base and so on. So that's all going to have to be balanced as well.
please describe current and realistic future energy storage technology?
Yeah, so these are all complicated questions that I'm trying to answer briefly, and I'm not doing great justice to. Energy storage is interesting in a lot of ways. We're trying to sort of pilot it and learn what storage can do. Storage is great for, the most obvious thing that storage is great for is sort of short duration, like 4 hours, 8 hours, taking the solar generation that comes in the middle of the day when load is pretty low, saving that energy a few hours, and then when the sun is going down but load is going up, you've got enough energy in your batteries to address that peak, right? That's the obvious thing. For that, storage is getting better and better. The costs are coming down. Second sort of area to think about, batteries are getting better at providing some of these kind of, electrical engineer, geek kind of things you have to worry about for reliability around voltage and frequency and so on. So we're testing some of those capabilities. And then other kinds of storage that might be important for addressing kind of long-term imbalances might not be batteries, actually. There's pumped hydro, there's sort of compressed air energy storage. There's a lot of technologies that are not sort of much used yet, but might become more and more important as our system gets more and more dominated by renewables. So we're kind of trying to keep our eye on a lot of those things.
Thank you. As a source of energy, what is the role of nuclear energy in Xcel's future? And people, please give your cards to the folks that are collecting them.
So I kind of hinted before. So nuclear, the energy from our nuclear units is about 30% of our energy today. It's about half of our carbon-free energy. So it's a key piece of our ability to provide today almost 60% carbon-free energy for our customers, right? So we have about 30% renewables, another 30% from nuclear makes almost 60% carbon-free. And those nuclear plants, we have said, it's important that we, in terms of achieving our carbon goals, getting to 80% reductions by 2030, they're going to play an important role, and running them through their current licenses, which is into the early to mid 2030s, is an important piece of that picture. Now, what happens beyond that, from 2030 on to 2050, and how do we get to 100% carbon-free energy? Is nuclear a part of that or not? That's sort of an up-in-the-air question. We haven't proposed to relicense the plants, but we also haven't said relicensing is off the table. We need to keep all options on the table. And then there's other carbon-free technologies that might come into play beyond 2030 as well. So we're going to have to, the nuclear plants provide carbon-free energy. This is to say nothing about the other debates around nuclear. There's justifiable debates around nuclear, but for carbon-free energy, we're going to have to either, we're going to have to replace that in some way. And so we're looking at different ways to do that. That'll also be, if you're interested, addressed in our resource plan that we're filing on July 1st.
Look forward to that. But it looks like we only have time for one more question. So can you speak to the trade-offs that may occur, for example, demand for copper required for wind turbines or handling nuclear waste? Alternatives have impacts too, but they don't create carbon. And are you guys looking into that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's true. Like every energy source has its pros and cons, right? I can't speak specifically to the copper in wind turbines. I mean, obviously, to build wind turbines, there's materials that go into them. There's also materials that go into solar panels and nuclear plants and everything, right? So if you were to compare everything on an equal basis, look at the sort of life cycle impacts of everything, you wouldn't find any sort of energy source with no impacts, right? And the nuclear waste issue, yeah, that's one that we're actively working on. We're pushing for a long-term waste solution. So these are all things that have to be weighed. I mean, when I talk to you about moving to 100% carbon-free electricity, I think that's really urgent from a climate perspective, but it's not the sole consideration, right? We're going to be trying to balance a lot of these impacts, and it's a complicated enterprise.
Thank you
so
much,
thank you.
Nicholas. You got hit with the questions. Appreciate that. Any questions that didn't get answered, please ask him at the table afterwards. But we're going to move to our next question on the screen. How much less energy do EVs consume compared to traditional internal combustion vehicles? And I'll introduce our next speaker, Yuka Kokkonen, is from Plug-in Connect. He's an EV market and business solutions consultant. Yuka combines his automotive industry experience with in-depth electric vehicle market knowledge, and he specializes in market dynamics and real-life user perspectives. He has built programs for utility companies, condominium and apartment buildings, charging, workplace charging, DC fast charging, outreach and education, and smart grid integration. He also teaches the EV Market and Technologies graduate course at the University of St. Thomas. For more information, go to www.pluginconnect.com and see more about his information there. And with that, welcome.
Well, good evening, everyone.
That's the button.
Okay, all right. Well, that's great. So, thank you, Nick, for taking care of half of my presentation here. That's always nice. Nick and I find ourselves in the same arenas nowadays. We were last week in the University of Minnesota, but I think we agreed that I'll take care of the used car sales perspective. So let's just keep it that way in the future. All right. So I have so I said my name is Yuka Kokkonen. I work with electric cars here, and I also coordinate the Minnesota plug-in vehicle owners, where we have 1,500 members here in Minnesota, and our owners set up the display outside there, so that was good. How many of you drive electric here? All right, keep your hands up here. Okay, so these folks, talk with these people after the presentation, because they know their stuff. They know their stuff, and you can ask them all the good questions, because we have very short time here. When I do the course at the University of St. Thomas, I have 45 hours with the students there to talk about electric vehicles. With you guys, I have 5 minutes. So you just can understand why I have to kind of focus here a little bit. So how much less energy do EVs consume compared to traditional internal combustion engine vehicles? Have everybody answered this question? Excellent. Because now we're going to show the results. Boom. 75. Hey, that's right. Good job. All right. Well, that took the second part of my presentation, so excellent. But that's true. I mean, we are just, when you think about the electric motors, they are so much more efficient than the internal combustion engine. And this is the big difference between traditional cars and electric cars. We are using so much less energy. So I will talk with you how to choose your next car. That's where we go. That's why I'm talking about the used car salesperson perspective here, definitely. So why choose an electric car? First of all, uses much less energy. We just figured that out. You knew that already, so that's pretty clear. That is great, because that's the first part of the whole puzzle here. The second part is no more oil. That is really, really, really important part of the whole thing. If you think about it, it is just very, very good. If you think about it, when we import oil here to Minnesota, at the same time we export a ton of money outside of Minnesota that is not in our business anymore. It goes outside, and it's not always used the right ways when it left Minnesota. And then if you think about it, how nutty this is, we are taking that oil here and we are burning it right here, taking all the emissions into here. How stupid is that? It's totally stupid. So again, why choose an electric car? No more oil. All right. You can power your driving with renewable. Nick already told you what Xcel Energy is doing in this area. That's great progress. Of course, you can do also more. Nick mentioned the wind source program. I, for example, have been a wind source customer for the last 10 years. It doesn't cost more than a couple bucks a month more. It's not a big investment. And then, of course, look into other ways to add more renewable there. So those are good options for you. No local emissions. If you think about it, you drive an electric car, there's no local emissions. You look at how many cars go around here. How many cars drive on 494 by Bloomington, through Bloomington here every day. Think about how much emissions they will produce to this area where we live, where our children live, where everybody is right here. It's just dumb again. So getting rid of all of that with EVs is the right way to go. They're also really fun to drive. You're not really losing anything. I mean, again, talk with these people who drive electric every day. They're just better cars. Everybody who starts driving electric, that's like never going back. And more torque, more power, just more advanced in every way. And I'm an automotive engineer by training. That's why I believe in electric cars, because I look at them from technology standpoint. They are just better cars. They're cheaper to drive and own, much cheaper to drive. If you drive about 1,000 miles a month and you use just a standard rate for electricity, about $35. That's what you'll be paying for it. If you take advantage of, for example, Xcel's EV rate, time of use rate when the electricity is half off during the nighttime, it's about $20 all your driving for the month. Then you start to compare how much you pay for this baby every month, and your driving doesn't cost you anything anymore. So just to give you a good perspective in comparison there. And also much less maintenance. Don't have to go to the dealer every half a year or year. You really don't. They heat up so much faster than in the wintertime than traditional cars. If you think about the traditional cars, to get heating inside the cabin, you have to first heat up the internal combustion engine. And if you drive 5 miles to work, it starts to heat up right about when you park your car. Whereas with electric cars, it starts immediately. If you have a heat pump heating system, it starts right away pretty much when you just get the car outside of the garage. It is great. And you can set it up so, like my wife has driven 7 years with electric cars, 7:20 in the morning when she goes in the cold garage, the car is waiting for her, interior is warm, her seat is hot, and even her steering wheel is hot. So it's pretty luxurious right from there. And then when she has her car parked outside at work, and she's thinking to leave the work, she just takes her cell phone and tells the car, could you please heat yourself up? And then when she goes out, the car is again warm to go back home. So no waiting. It's much more enjoyable to drive in that way. And it's very easy to charge at home. You don't have to be figuring out, okay, I have to go to the gas station to fill up there, so go that way. Some people are afraid of change, but we can drive it. That's important for you. So for you, you should have one of these lists of all the electric vehicles that are available in Minnesota. Now we could spend the next 3 hours talking about all of these things, but unfortunately we don't have that. So you have to do some homework yourself and check out those and go test drive them. And you can also find this online on a PDF format. So on the bottom of it, you have a line there where you can find the information about, or that one in PDF format. So then how to choose your next car? First, commit to not buying an internal combustion engine vehicle. That's the first commitment you have to do. Next car will be electric one way or another. There's just nothing there. Then if you want to, you have two choices then. Full battery electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid. And I'm giving you a couple of ideas how you can choose between those two. So if you want to get rid of oil altogether, take a full battery electric vehicle, because then you don't carry any gas, you can't use any oil anymore. You're out of it. So that's that. And again, you can do that overnight. And if you have more than one car in your family, this is a very easy thing to do. You can just move, no problems. That doesn't mean that you can do it with just one car, but it's just one step easier if you do it that way. Use battery electric vehicles that get 50 to 150 miles of range. You can buy for $8,000 to $15,000 nowadays. They're not too expensive. New ones with 150 to 370 miles of range. Again, range is not an issue anymore. It used to be 5 years ago, not anymore. They start from $20,000 going up from there. Then the other option is plug-in hybrid. So if this one, the first miles are always electric, and then after that, it turns into hybrid mode. This one is good if you just have one car in your household, so then you don't have any limitation there. You can normally drive the normal 30 to 40 miles or something like that. But if you need a lot of flexibility in your driving, you can do it with this car. So if you don't know, if you one day you have to drive to North Dakota, you drive to North Dakota. That's not an issue in that way. Use plug-in hybrids with 10 to 35 miles of EV range, about 10 to 15,000, and new ones with 15 to 53 miles of electric range, about 24,000 after the federal tax credit. And again, you can find all the information about the new ones right in this one, so that's easy. So my suggestion is go look at the list, figure out which ones you potentially like, and then go and test drive them. Have fun. That's what you can do, because I can't tell you you should buy this car, you should buy that car. It's a personal decision. You have to go and test drive and see, oh, I actually like this one better than that one. And that's how it is. But remember that no plug, no deal. That's the mantra that you have to go. Because when you go to dealers, they will potentially try to sell you a senior utility vehicle. And you can say, I'm not that old yet, so I don't want one of those. So because they have so many of those at the lot, that's why they try to sell you the traditional ones. You make very clear to them, I want the one that I can plug in because that's the best choice for me. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. Okay. And I think you may have answered one of these, but is cold weather a problem for EVs?
The cold weather is not a problem for EVs. You will have less of rains in the wintertime because the batteries will provide less capacity in the winter. So let's say you buy a new Nissan Leaf that that's EPA rating is about 150 miles. In a nice days, you might be able to get 170 miles out of that. In really, really, really cold winter days, maybe 110 miles. So as long as you know that and you're aware of it, no issues. But just know that that's the case.
Next question. Are there high-speed chargers being added around the state?
Yes, there's already over 500 locations for charging infrastructure around the state. And there's more DC fast charging coming online all the time too. So MPCA is, for example, doing VW settlement funding for those, and we'll see more and more DC fast charging stations coming from that program. But remember, the place to charge your car is at home. 80 to 90% of charging happens at home. That's where you charge your car. My wife, for example, has driven every day with an electric car for the last 7 years. She has not used a public charging station a single time. That's just how it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll move on to our next speaker. And our next question. By weight, how much of our trash is comprised of organics, food waste, and other compostable materials? And I'll introduce our speaker. John James is an organics and recycling specialist with the Hennepin County Department of Environment and Energy. John's work focuses on growing the organics division through outreach and technical assistance, new policies and programs, ensuring adequate composting capacity, and exploring additional organics processing opportunities, including anaerobic digestion. Prior to joining Hennepin County, John worked in the nonprofit and private sectors on industrial pollution prevention and cleaner production. Welcome, John. Thanks. This button right there to go to the answers.
To go to the answer, okay. We'll see. 2 more seconds to get your answer in. So even though a previous presentation said up to 40% organics, if you remember that slide, you were able to cheat a little bit, but overall,
Down.
the down. Ooh, there we go. So people said 40. The overall, if you took all the trash from businesses, from residents, from institutions, put it in a big pile, overall, in Bloomington and Hennepin County and Minnesota, across the country, 30%. So about 30% of our trash is organics. Okay. Oh, there we go. All right, I'm getting there. So talking about recycling, it may not be as fun as driving a new electric vehicle, but it is a very easy way to reduce your carbon footprint by reducing your greenhouse gas emissions. You will also see as I go through this presentation that preventing waste in the first place really has the largest impact overall, which intuitively you probably already know that, but there's also some numbers to back it up. So this really should say reducing greenhouse gas emissions by preventing waste and recycling. So to begin to wrap your mind around how do you reduce greenhouse gas emissions through recycling, how do you achieve environmental benefits, I think this illustration does a really good job of helping you do that. When I try to explain it to people, I've used this diagram many times, is, first think about whatever product you want to think about. In this particular case, we're talking about how paper is made. And if you're making brand new, sparkling white office paper from virgin raw materials, this is essentially the entire process that you have to go through. Trees have to be grown, they have to be harvested, they have to be shipped to a paper making facility where before the wood gets there, it's chipped somewhere. Then there's chemical pulping. There's a lot of energy that goes into all of that process. There's to make the chemicals that go into the process, right? All of that to then get the paper to you. So there's all kinds of resources and energy tied up into this paper. Now, if you're making this same paper from recycled paper, basically most of the things above that dotted line, not everything, but you don't have to grow new trees, you don't have to harvest them, you don't have to bring them to a paper making facility. You can repulp this paper, de-ink it, and repulp it fairly quickly and easily with a lot less energy, a lot less water, and a lot less chemicals. And by doing that, you then avoid all of the greenhouse gas emissions related to that additional energy and the additional chemicals, et cetera, that go into that. And you can think that same thing about whether you're talking about turning an aluminum can into another aluminum can, or if you're going to be mining bauxite to make a brand new aluminum can, or turning glass back into glass. So whatever product it is, if you're making that product from virgin raw materials and you go through that entire extraction and manufacturing process, it's just a much more resource and energy intensive process than if you make it from a recycled resources. So your tax dollars at work. If you want to put numbers onto that, exactly what are the benefits, what are the greenhouse gas emission reductions, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency about, I think it was roughly 15 years ago, came out with something called the WARM model, which takes all of that information, puts it into algorithms, plugs it into an Excel spreadsheet. You can go on epa.gov/warm and download your own spreadsheets if you want, and you plug the information in, and it allows you to compare alternative management scenarios for materials. So if I was going to landfill organics rather than compost them, what are the differences in greenhouse gas emissions? What are the other benefits? That's what this allows you to do. So you can look at landfilling, waste to energy, otherwise known as incineration, recycling, composting, etc. And then it spits out numbers for you, and you could see exactly how much benefit you've received. So this is an example. I work for Hennepin County. This is a Hennepin County example for 2009. Residents recycled more than 117,000 tons of various of recyclables. We plugged that into the WARM model, and you can see what the benefits were by avoiding those greenhouse gas emissions associated with raw material extraction, manufacturing, etc. So that was equivalent to removing 41,300 cars from the road annually, which was enough. It saved enough energy to provide heating, cooling, electricity for 20,500 households, and then you can see the rest there. So those are the kind of numbers that you get. Food waste and organics. I've been working on food waste and organics for 15 years. So I could go way, way deep on this. I won't. But this is kind of, how many of you have heard that in the U.S. we waste about 40% of our food? So the word has gotten out, and probably why you heard about it was this report came out from the Natural Resources Defense Council in 2009 called Wasted. How America is losing up to 40% of its food from, farm to fork to landfill. So this then led to all kinds of things going on. So to think about food waste and all the resources, and this is a plug of why you should be preventing food waste along with other waste, and why you should, if you do have food waste left over, you should collect it and take it to one of those organics drop-offs that Tim talked about at the very beginning, think about, again, all the resources that are tied up in that food. So this is on a national basis. That food waste, that 40% takes up a quarter of the fresh water used in the U.S. Just think about that. A quarter of the fresh water is tied up in that 40% of food waste. 4% of U.S. oil consumption tied up in that food waste. Goes on. Much of this food waste is landfilled. When food waste goes into landfill, it breaks down without oxygen. It breaks down anaerobically, and that creates methane. Methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It's anywhere, I've seen estimates from 30 to 80% more potent than CO2. So by preventing that food waste, by recycling that food waste, you then reduce a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. If you're interested in tips on how to do that, this led to a whole new effort by the NRDC called stopfoodwaste.org. If you go to stopfoodwaste.org, there's all kinds of tips on better purchasing, storage, prep, etc. to reduce food waste. The last thing I'm going to just point out here is, again, talking about prevention. So it's great to recycle. Sometimes I've seen where people are so crazy about recycling, it seems like they generate more waste just so they can recycle more. It's great that you recycle your waste, but you really want to think about preventing it. And some agencies like ours, this really Oregon Department of Environmental Quality is leading this by looking at, in green here is really just managing the waste. But when you look at the extraction and the manufacturing of materials, they've done a report that shows that almost 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions emitted nationwide are really associated with materials use. So not just the waste. So when you look at it that way, it's a much, much bigger slice of where the emissions are coming from, and that we need to really start looking upstream more. So with that, I will stop.
I have a couple questions for you. Thank you, John. A couple of these questions I think got answered at an earlier presentation that the Sustainability Commission put on, so I will jump a couple.
Okay.
I apologize to people. If you want to ask those questions, please do at the table. Is it possible to give restaurants incentives to use compostable takeout containers, and do some cities do this?
It is possible to have those incentives. In fact, Hennepin County has a business recycling program that's been going on for several years that provides funding for businesses to either start new recycling programs or improve existing ones, including organics recycling. And part of that, you can buy up to a 6-month supply of compostable foodware, which includes to-go containers. If you want to know more about that, talk to me afterward.
Should we go back to separating our household recyclables?
Oh, good question. Let's just say for people who are really, really passionate about recycling, I would say when in doubt, throw it away. And I know many people who are very passionate about recycling think the exact opposite. There aren't magic little elves at the recycling facilities that pull out every little wrong thing. The way things get processed are on high-speed conveyor belts. They're processing about 40 tons an hour of material, and there's not people, they're pulling really big things out, but a lot of the contamination will not get pulled out. So if you're not sure, throw it away. Also check the city of Bloomington's website. They have a great list of what should go in your recycling cart and what should not.
I have a feeling that's all the time we have for questions, so I appreciate
Okay.
that. If your question did not get answered, please talk to John out at the table. And we will move on to our next program. Thank you. So I have another speaker to introduce. We have another question up on the screen. If everyone in the U.S. ate no meat or cheese just one day a week, it would be equivalent to taking how many cars off the road? Wow. And our next speaker, Bill Adamski, grew up on a farm in Wisconsin and is still knowing the basics regarding agricultural practices. For 35 years, he worked as an air pollution meteorologist with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and did regulatory duties to help keep the ambient air as clean as possible from contaminants. Bill feels global warming is all about the existential life consequences born from injecting humongous amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. So he is very active with the organization MN350, working to help convince the powers that be that it is immediately necessary to significantly reduce carbon in the atmosphere in order to preserve the livability of our planet. And with that, I'd like to welcome our last speaker and best, maybe? Bill, come on up. Just so you know, this is the button.
That's the button. Okay, thank you. Hi there. Thank you. We'll move to the first slide here. Is this one here?
That's your answer. The answer.
Oh, the answer. Oh, there we go. Okay. It's the answer is actually 7,600,000. This is across the United States, though. It just gives you an idea of how much global warming gases are emitted in the production of meat and other animal protein, in this case, dairy products, especially cheese. So, yeah, it's a big factor. Ag and global warming gases are, they're big numbers. Okay, is this one here? Okay, there's my title. We're going to talk about agriculture and global warming. And let me just say that these are the 4 sections of my presentation. And essentially, we're going to talk about agriculture and global warming as both as in a trifecta of it being a source of global warming emissions, being a victim of global warming emissions, and being a potential solution to reducing global warming emissions. So it's got a lot of character to it. Okay, the first one, agricultural practices that lead to the sizable amount of global warming emissions. And just the basics, we all know about CO2, and that's, as you can see from the pie chart, that's far and away the largest by mass. I want to call attention to methane, CH4, as well as nitrous oxide, N2O. They are just slivers in the pie chart of global warming gases, but their potency, as you can see, is considerably, many times more than what CO2 has. For methane, CH4, 30 times, N2O, 300 times. So even though they might be small in volume, they do pack a lot of wallop on their own. And the methane and the N2O, which aren't as well known in the general public as far as global warming gases, they are much more prevalent in agricultural practices. Just want to show that ag, as well, combined with forestry and other land use, comes in barely just under that for electricity and heat production. Ag and the other operations, 24%, just under the 25% for electricity and heat. So it's a sizable source of GHG, global warming emissions. And now we get to farm-related global warming emissions, and this is where methane, particularly in it's the belching from livestock animals. A lot of people sort of snicker at it might be coming out the other end, but it's actually they're belching. But it is a sizable, as you can see, it's a very sizable source of methane in the nation. And then rice cultivation Nitrous oxide, another major outsized source for global warming emissions, fertilizers and waste, and then CO2, which again we're most familiar with, soil respiration, particularly from plowing. That's exacerbated by tillage. When they talk about tillage, they're talking about turning the ground over and exposing the land, particularly the soil microbes, which are holding in a lot of the CO2, and it's released to the atmosphere, and as well as just burning gasoline and diesel in tractors and other farm equipment. So, and now the second part of it is the impact of global warming on agricultural production. And in terms of water flow, hydraulic, we've seen this more intense rainfall events as well as drought. So we've got this extremes in rainfall and drought considerations. It's just wacky weather that it puts a stress on the crops, and it reduces production. In some cases, crops are destroyed. Heavy rainfall events add to soil erosion. Excessive heat. It leads to more stress on crops, stress on the soils, also greatly reducing productivity. Continuing, CO2. We've heard that CO2 sometimes helps with increasing crop productivity because plants need carbon, but they also, in general, reduce the nutritional value. Weeds, pests, others thrive in excessively warm weather. Heat waves increase stress on livestock, and droughts reduce the amount of pasture and forage for the grazing livestock. At nighttime, we're talking about CO2. Mostly the warmer weather is coming at night with the greenhouse effect, where it traps the long-wave radiation coming out at night, and that accelerates the evaporation of in the crops, dries them out. This decreases photosynthetic production as well as their just general productivity. Finally, just overall economic consequences. In general, reduced yields lead to price increases for the agricultural crops that are of main consideration: rice, wheat, maize, and soybeans. Increased prices for basic food as well as animal feed. In general, climate change leads to greater food insecurity. Okay, moving on to the third portion here, improving agricultural practices to help. Okay, this basically can be summarized in 2 words, a general term, and it's called regenerative agriculture, where this is where we start moving into where improving agricultural practices can actually aid in moving carbon out of the atmosphere and into the soils, from being bad up in the atmosphere with its global warming impacts to into the soils, where it can actually provide useful work for the plants and soil microbes. The photosynthetic effect, I'll just move on here. The plants pull the CO2 out of the air, and this deals with turbulence. The air works its way down with the CO2 in the air. It hits the surface where it's pulled out of the atmosphere by the plants. Photosynthesis, they draw down the carbon into the soil. The expiration process involves the release of oxygen as a byproduct. And then the goal is to try to get more carbon pulled down into the atmosphere than what is actually released into the atmosphere. Actual practices, you want to have green on the surface. Bare ground in agricultural fields doesn't do us any good in terms of working the pulling the CO2 out of the air. You need ground, you need crop cover, and plants. Growing them, they're very helpful off season between crops. But even more effective is planting trees. And the next two categories are just that, where trees are planted between fields for agroforestry. Trees are just much more effective in pulling the CO2 out of the atmosphere and working the photosynthesis to draw the carbon back down into the soils, where they can be used for regenerating the soil as well as the plants. And then Silvopasture is another version of that, where you basically have pastures where you have trees. You have cows, cattle grazing among trees, and that way you don't waste land just devoted strictly to forage material. And then rotational grazing, along the same lines of reducing the stress on the pasture, let them rest. The plants have a chance to regenerate and get healthy again. And also, there's a byproduct of literally with the animal dung is sort of they self-fertilize the land with more carbon through their animal droppings. Okay, and is it coming? Just these other things here. No-till. Again, avoiding plowing is a big thing towards keeping the soil stable and regenerative. And finally, improving consumer choices. This is probably the tall bar chart portion of the bar chart is people eating lots of meat, and they are the type of people whose food choices result in much more global warming gases being emitted. And it works its way down to vegan, which is less than half of what a meat lover would generate in terms of their carbon footprint. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Bill. I think you've pretty much answered all the questions that people wrote for me. Okay. So I just want to mention again, if people have any further questions for any of our speakers, please talk to them at the tables outside. We have a few minutes left that we can be doing that. And thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate all of the interactive participation from the audience, and I hope you learned a lot about the different aspects of things we can do to change in our own lives, ways to reduce our impact on carbon and sustainability, being more sustainable. But with that, I guess we will wrap up and come on out to the tables and talk to some of our speakers. And thank you so much.
Thank you.